Shalom and welcome. This is Nitsa Moshe from Remnant Remedy, and this is number 3 episode of Remnant Remedy Tours Israel. And this one is about Avraham Sand and his ministry business in Moshav of Modi'im in Israel, between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, the airport area. Unfortunately, since we filmed this, as of last week, that Moshav was like at least probably 90% burnt down by an arson, along with some other fires that were in Israel. We found out that Avraham, even though they can't go back home, can't go to the synagogue, and his oils were spared, he can't go there because there's no infrastructure. Over 90%, again, I believe, of it was destroyed. I encourage you to sign up. Don't miss our newsletter on this topic that will accompany the link to this video. And if you don't mind sharing it and liking it and subscribing at Remnant Remedy on YouTube. So I pray that your garments are always white and your head like so SHEMEN, and that you'll enjoy this video and time that we spent in Israel reading through the excerpt of Avraham's new book that hopefully will come out soon, even despite the fire, maybe delayed a little bit. Meanwhile, don't miss his book, Mystical Aromatherapy. Thank you.
Our world is on the edge of destruction. That's how my book starts. Yeah. Doesn't sound very good, right? But I figure we might as well face the facts.
I would agree, yeah.
New revolutionary and dynamic leadership is desperately needed. I'm talking about within the Jewish folk. But also with others, to set our planetary course right. The Jewish people, considered a light to the nations, whatever that means, have a special long-term responsibility to be the caretakers, healers, and visionaries of spaceship Earth, to ensure the safety, health, and longevity of all people and all living things on the planet. I'm saying that we Jewish folks are responsible for this. This is really what my book is about. And this is a function of a priest, of a Kohen, is to be responsible for all of God's creation. During recent generations, most Jewish folks have stepped away from the tribe one way or another. And these days, we even need to bring religious people back to God. You might have noticed that some of the most religious people are some of the people who really don't have any idea what's going on with loving and caring for everyone and everything and all of God's creation. And they've kind of relegated themselves and put themselves in the corner, surrounded with their religious practices. And I think they're missing the whole point of why we're here in the first place. As Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach has said, the patient desperately needs a heart transplant, not a manicure. In other words, we need a huge wake-up call in our tradition if we're going to arise to fulfill our responsibility, even to understand what our responsibilities are. An infusion of new, much deeper and much more visionary, high-conscious Judaism based in reality is vitally needed for revival in these dark days right before the dawn. We must begin to unite as a people and prepare the next generation to build the third temple and much more fully assume our role as a nation of priests on this planet. Amen. Now, this is the thing. We're told that we're a Mamlechet Kohanim and a Goy Kadosh, which means we're a nation of priests. All the Jewish people are priests. We're a whole nation, and we're a holy people. And we all know this, but very, very few Jewish folks know at all what this really means. That's why I'm trying to write this book. Why are Jewish folks responsible for the whole planet today? These words from the book of Exodus reveal how, long ago, the nation of Israel entered into an eternal and unbreakable cosmic bond with the eternal one that is valid today more than ever. You know, here's a quote from Exodus, and you've probably run across it yourselves. Moses went up to God. God called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you must say to the family of Jacob and tell the Israelites. You saw what I did in Egypt, carrying you on eagle's wings and bringing you to me. Now, if you obey me and keep my covenant, you will be my special treasure among all nations, even though all the world is mine. You will be a kingdom of priests, a mamlechet kohanim, and a holy nation, goy kadosh, to me. These are the words that you must tell to all the Israelites." It's in Exodus. And we still didn't quite figure this out, like we read it. Every time we read the Torah, once a year, we come across this, but people are not really fully grasping this. These words describe the eternal covenant and contract between the Jewish people and God that he specified to Moses before the revelation of the Torah on Mount Sinai. In essence, God said to us as a nation, "If you people of Israel will agree to these conditions, to keep my laws and ordinances, then you will always be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Do you agree to enter into this eternal, unbreakable bond with me?" He asked us at Mount Sinai. Moses relayed these words to the people of Israel and asked for their answer, asked for a response, and everyone agreed. All the people of Israel agreed to enter into this covenant with God, saying, "Na'aseh v'nishma." Ever heard those words before? We will do, and then we will hear. In other words, we said we'll agree to do this, even though we don't really know what it is. We trust you. And after we get involved with doing it, then we'll begin to hear and understand what it is we're even supposed to be doing. So all of Israel have all this time, since that day, have long been unbreakably bonded into an eternal contract with God to be a nation of priests, a holy people, and in essence, caretakers of our whole world. This ancient contract is still active and binding today. One very important clue about the nature of our identity as a Jewish nation is revealed by investigating the relationship of our own Kohanim, our own priests, to the people of Israel. In other words, as a people, we have priests, we have Kohanim. It's only maybe 1% or 2% of the Jewish people are Kohanim, and you have to inherit it from your father. Your father has to be a Kohen, and then you can become a Kohen, and you take on that responsibility to be priests to the people of Israel. And there's a parallel of our own priests to the people of Israel that's parallel to all the people of Israel being priests to all the nations of the world. And that's why this book is really relevant to all of us here. I mean, because as a people, as a Jewish people, it's just not just a nice thing to do. We signed a contract. We entered into a contract to be the priests of the planet, to be God's caretakers of all of his creation, and make sure that everything is properly taken care of, and people are taken care of, and all the nature is preserved, and we take care of everything. This relationship is exactly parallel to the people of Israel being Kohanim. For the Jewish people is the people of Israel being Kohanim for all the people on earth. And that's what my book is about. It explores what is a priest, because we know from our own studies, what is a Jewish priest, what are his responsibilities, how does he act in the community. The first priest was Aaron. He was the first high priest. And when we study the nature of Aaron and who he was and how he lived and all the stories about him, that gives us clues and important information about how we as a Jewish people have to take care of everyone and everything by studying the nature of our own priests, such as Aaron. That's why I have one chapter in my book about Aaron and all the different stories and teachings about him, and by studying him, we learn more and more about who we are as a whole people and what our responsibilities are on the planet. Okay, so this is kind of how the book starts out, and I'm trying to lay it. Is anybody following? Ask me questions.
Yes, powerful. What kind of feel?
This book really needs to be written.
Wow.
I'm a terrible writer, I'm not an author.
Oh, it sounds
But still, my books are not written because I like to write books or because I'm an author, I'm trying to make money as an author, nothing like that. It's just there's certain things that are not being said that need to be said, and I just couldn't hold back. And I just had to get this, between two covers and hand it out to people, and whoever's interested can read it. It seems really important. Here's a personal story about me and how I got into this, because I was not always a Kohen. I didn't know that I was a Kohen when I was born and when I was growing up. And even when I got involved with Judaism, when I was about 24 years old and I came to Israel, I started to get involved with Judaism seriously, religious Judaism. I did not know I was a Kohen for about 10 years. I just didn't know. And I didn't practice being a Kohen, and I didn't do the things that Kohanim do, and I didn't know very much about it, because I didn't realize that I myself was a Kohen. And then something really strange happened to me. And this is how I got on this track about studying who Kohanim are and what they do. So here's my story a little bit. And my book is filled with my travel stories. The book has 3 different levels. It's my personal story and my travel stories, things I experienced in my life that are related to me living and being a Kohen and waking up to my responsibilities. Secondly, the book tells about the Jewish Kohanim, what their responsibilities are to the people of Israel, and how they should practice among our people to be priests. And the third level is how our whole nation, all the people of Israel, are priests to all the nations of the world. It's sort of like 3-dimensional chess, and I'm weaving these 3 themes together throughout the book, because they're all connected. I have my own personal travel stories woven throughout the text. I have information about how to be a priest of the people of Israel. And especially, most important, I have information I'm trying to direct to the people, all the people of Israel, about our responsibilities being priests on the planet. Are you glad you chose this topic? Because we could have talked about the temple incense or the anointing oil or something else. Did we choose the right topic?
Yeah, I believe so.
I fell into this Kohen thing completely unexpectedly. During my travels, I would often visit my father at his home in Texas. He lived outside Dallas. On one of those visits, about 10 years after I first became involved with religious Judaism, when I came to Israel, I made an amazing discovery regarding my grandfather, my father's father. Also, my father himself, I found out something amazing, and myself and our entire family. My father's father, Louis Shackett was his name, was a fantastic musician, an incredibly talented piano player, and he taught many students to play piano. He grew up in a strictly religious and upstanding Jewish home. But in his younger years, he began to wander away from the Orthodox community and his family, and eventually he began playing music in a very hot jazz band in the New York City area, which he loved to do. This was back in the Roaring 20s. 1924, 1925, he was in this jazz band in New York, in the New York area. This was Stamford, Connecticut, where he lived. Now, Friday nights were the most important night for the band's performances. That's when they had, like the best, most important gigs and got the most money for playing jazz. And my grandfather had to choose between his love of music and playing in a jazz band, and he loved nightlife, or his religious Judaism of his family, because Friday night is a Sabbath, and you're not supposed to play music or go out like that. You're supposed to go to the synagogue and go home and have a nice meal with your family and so forth. And he had to make a choice because his family was very religious, and either he had to choose the band and his life, as an entertainer, or his religious Judaism. So he chose
the music and the band and the nightlife, and he became the black sheep of his family. That's what happened. And on my way home from Southern California, this was in 1985, I was on my way back to Israel. I stopped near Dallas to visit with my dad, and we had a chance to spend one Shabbos together during my visit. So on Friday night, at the Shabbos table, after the meal, you're drinking wine at the meal, and after the meal, we continue to enjoy some special wine. We're kicking back and drinking wine, chatting and sharing stories. I had a flash suddenly, and I asked my father to tell me more about his father, who passed away when I was only 3 years old. So I never really knew him as a child, and my father almost never talked about him for whatever reason. He wouldn't talk about his father very often. So like I said to him, Dad, could you tell me more about your father? You never talk about him. My dad took another sip of wine. He sat up abruptly in his chair. He suddenly had remembered something that his father had once told him in confidence. And then he leaned back in his chair and he quoted his father, "Remember and never forget that I am a Kohen." My father's father told my father. And it was in the back of his memory. He never said this to me before. I was absolutely shocked. My father did not realize that according to Jewish law, this meant that he was a Kohen, and my brother and I are Kohanim, and our children would be Kohanim. I nearly fell off my chair because I had been even married to a woman who was a convert, and I wasn't supposed to marry her as a Kohen. She had an ectopic pregnancy and couldn't conceive after that. Our marriage didn't work out. We got divorced. And then, right 6 months after our divorce, that's when this happened. I came to visit my father. He suddenly told me this. And he suddenly said his father's a Kohen. I was absolutely shocked. And then my dad glared at me quizzically from across the table, raised his eyebrows, and demanded, "Why? What's it to you?" That's what happened to me. That's how I got into this in the first place. I was totally... So I kind of became a Kohen by choice. I didn't know what to do. I came back to Israel. I went to different rabbis to ask them what to do. My father told me this. What should I do? What does it mean? Am I a Kohen or not? How can I verify it? Should I verify it or just forget it? Or should I start practicing? Different rabbis told me different things. But the two rabbis I was most connected with said, "You're a Kohen, you believe, you go by your father, you don't need to do any further investigation. Go learn what it means to be a Kohen and get to work. Go start practicing. Start practicing being a Kohen." You see, during the prayers, have you ever been in a synagogue when the Jewish people are praying? This is a pretty wild thing, There's a certain point in the prayers where the Kohanim, the priests, have to go up to the front of the congregation during the repetition of the Shemona Esrei, and we cover ourselves with our talis, and the Shliach Tzibor, the person leading the davening, is cueing us with certain keywords, and the congregation is not allowed to look at us. They have to look down or look away. It's too powerful. They can't look at us. And anyway, we're covered with our talis, so you can't see our face. And we have to do this thing with our hands. Give a rechecha. There's a special 3-part blessing that we have to say. Some of the words you say straight, with your arms straight, stretched out like this. But anything that says "to you," that means to you, or we're saying to you, we have to swing our arms as if to say we're blessing all the people, not just the people in the shul, but all the people on the planet. A lot of Kohanim don't even realize this. But during this blessing, our kavana, our intention has to be that we're blessing all the people of the planet with love. And this is like this epitomizes our responsibility as the Jewish people to bless all the people of the world with love. This is like a parallel. What our own priests are doing, blessing us, blessing our nation, is a parallel of who we are as a Jewish people, what we're supposed to be doing, blessing the whole planet with love all the time. So that's one aspect of being a Kohen that, I had to learn how to do that blessing in the right way with the right intention. And there are very special teachings about it. For example, if a Kohen sitting in the congregation is feeling any anger towards anyone, he's not allowed to go up. You cannot feel any. It's really hard to do that because there's always somebody somewhere who's just bugging you out. I'm not just talking about the people sitting in shul. You have to clear your heart of anger of anyone on the planet, at least for those 3 minutes that you're up there. And if you can't do that, you're not allowed to go up and bless. You have to be totally free of any anger. That's one, very cardinal rule. You have to follow us. You can't go up. Not only can you not go up, you have to get out of the shul while it's happening. You can't just sit there. If you're a Kohen, either you get up or you get out. You can't just sit in the shul while the Kohanim are blessing. You can't come back in until the blessing is finished. You can't feel any anger or else you can't go up. You have to love your community. You have to feel so much love for your community that you have to go up there when you say this blessing. You're not just mouthing the words or just going through this thing. You have to actually feel love for your community and by extension for all the people on the planet. And third, another rule that's a requirement to be able to go up and do the blessing is you have to feel that your community loves you. If you don't feel that your community loves you, you have to get out while the blessing is happening. These are the 3 kind of cardinal rules about being able to go. You have to be a Kohen, obviously, but you have to be clear of anger. I use a technique of, before the blessing comes up, of clearing. I have to go into a meditation and really clear my heart of any anger. I have to fill my heart with love for the people in my community. And I have to see through all the, because people don't always signal you that they love you. You get all kinds of different feelings from people and a lot of confusing things. I have to find my way through all that and feel the love that my community has for me. And unless I can pass through these 3 gates, I can't go up and do the blessing. So a lot of Kohanim don't come to shul at all. Because it's very embarrassing to have to go out. This happens every morning, and on Shabbat morning twice. Very embarrassing for a Kohen to have to go out of shul and not be able to go up and bless the people. And everybody sees you walking out. So a lot of the Kohanim just don't come at all. If they just know that they can't reach that level, where they can clean themselves, clean their heart, and purify themselves. And of course, before we do the blessing, I have to go out to the sink. And the Levites, the Levi'im, pour water over our hands. We have to have water poured over our hands by the Levites. And we have a certain blessing that we make when we first go up, and then this 3-part blessing. All right, would you like to be the first reader? Would you read this little section for us? Just, it goes from here to there. Just this part. Okay, go. What's your name?
Jed.
Okay. Yeah, just read it.
Very close enough. Okay. As an adult, during my global travels, I have had many awakening experiences. I met so many kinds of amazing people along my way, especially in the third world countries. Looking back, I may not remember all of the details, but the people whose paths I crossed formed an intricate and beautiful collage of humanity. Several times in foreign lands, my life was saved by a complete stranger. There were many dangers along the way, but compared to today, hitchhiking across Europe and Asia in the mid-1970s was relatively easy and safe. Carrying a USA passport in those former good days, as long as you were on a main road anywhere between London and New Delhi, it was possible to catch a safe ride with some type of moving vehicle any time of the day or night. I felt very blessed and protected on my journey, so I ventured far and wide, even at night, hitchhiking and carrying my backpack with survival gear. I could set up camp almost anywhere, or even when necessary, jump into a ditch and spend the night safely. In hindsight, it is clear that most of the difficulties I went through I brought upon myself by not being much more open, loving, and trusting, and simply going with the flow. Many times a situation that seemed frightening or distressful at first turned out miraculously. For example, I became distressed when the customs officials would not let me hitchhike across the border from Yugoslavia into Albania. Later, I learned that in 1974, there were no cars or paved roads anywhere in Albania.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, a lot of my experiences I got from traveling, especially in Asia, mostly hitchhiking. And in those days, you could travel as an American straight across from London to India and Nepal, and you had all friendly countries with a U.S. passport. There was no problem, and I very rarely felt in any danger, traveling in those days, just walking, hiking, hitchhiking along the way. There were people coming through all the time, both directions, and I had some really amazing experiences. And I didn't think that much about them until recently when I started learning more about this Kohen thing and how we are a nation of Kohanim and what that means. I started thinking back about some of the experiences I had, and I realized how they're all really deeply connected to this study. So in this book, I have a number of my different travel stories. I have stories of travels I did in Afghanistan, a Jewish community of carpet makers that I visited in Iran. I was attacked in Turkey by kids and miraculously saved. And just incredible stories I had that, in the back of my mind. I put them back together again and wrote them down and wrote them out, and they all fit in somewhere in this book. They kind of, like threading the needle, they came through in different areas of my study, and I set them in place in the book. I have maybe 10 or 15 travel stories in there. It's pretty wild, I know, nothing really, not your typical type of book. But, okay, so that was the first reading. Okay, want to do any questions? Let's do the next one. Start with, as a nation of priests.
As a nation of priests who are our original role models.
Who are our original role models?
Our patriarchs and matriarchs are amazing examples of people who did not become corrupted by the material world. Our ancestors are role models who are highly aware of dedicating their lives to the future, to the divine and beyond. When we are doing mitzvot, commandments of the Torah, and connecting to the Holy One, we are transcended. We can transcend anything, because through physical acts, in the process of bringing the physical and spiritual together, we experience spirituality. In this way, we can reach a higher consciousness, all one, the manifestation of God's essence, which is actually totally beyond the physical and spiritual. The Kohanim truly are infusing the world with spirituality. Actually, all of Israel, as a
Mamlechet Kohanim,
are ultimately working together harmoniously as servants of God to safeguard the planet. As we know, the duty, responsibility, and privilege of a Kohen as a member of the nation of priests is to guide, protect, and bless all the people on earth and all of God's creation. One of the greatest teachers who has impacted my life very profoundly, a guiding light whose teachings reoccur throughout this book, is Rabbi Shlomo. blessed memory. Reb Shlomo, as he is known to those who treasure his memory, perhaps more than any other person in recent history, is our own living role model of Aharon, the high priest.
Right.
As the leader of our nation of priests, he traveled the world and lovingly cared for people across our entire planet. His music and teachings have spread worldwide, especially since his death in 1994. Rabbi Shlomo was honest, deep, and a shining light, and a loving soul, and a great...
Does that be a little more? Let's see this.
And a blessing in spite of continually circumventing a dense swamp of outdated Jerusalem.
A dense swamp of outdated Judaism.
With his deep teachings, charismatic presence, his holy stories, and the sweetest music on earth, he built a new superhighway of authentic, awakened, and truly loving Judaism, which both Jewish and non-Jewish people worldwide. He showed us how to love and care for each other, and also how to incorporate our love of music, art, and all creative pursuits to authenticate Judaism.
Beautiful. This is his community. This is Rabbi Shlomo's community. He lived here. This is his, thank you.
Yes,
So
sorry.
sweet. He lived here. He still has a home here today. His family come sometimes. He passed away in 1994. But he was an incredible teacher. I mean, very non-judgmental, very loving. He could see right through you, but he wouldn't judge you. He would always see the good in people. He was an amazing musician. He brought down the most beautiful melodies from heaven, more than 1,000 different melodies. Some of them we preserved and recorded and remember. Some of them were lost. Sometimes in some gatherings, a melody would come up no one ever heard before or again, and we didn't record it, so it was just lost. Probably at least half of the beautiful melodies that he brought down just, were completely lost and forgotten and maybe lost forever.
Would one of his songs be The Return Again?
Yes, let's sing it. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Everybody, return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you were born and reborn again. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Beautiful. Allah, la, 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 la. Hi, da, 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 la, Allah, la, la, la. Hi, da, 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 da. His melodies were so easy to sing and feel in your heart. Return to the land of your soul. He was also a Torah genius. He was going to take over from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was like the prodigy of the greatest rabbi on earth. But he didn't want to take on that responsibility of being the leader of the religious Jews. He preferred to go out to college campuses and bring people back to Judaism and go to ashrams in India and all these strange places all over the world to reach Jewish people and all kinds of people. He wouldn't even ask people if they were Jewish. He just went to all these places and just loved everyone and sang and taught. And his teachings and his music were so universal that it didn't matter what tradition you were from. He was like the highway for everyone, like where we all meet, where we're all really one people, all the people on the planet, before it's broken down to these are Jews, these are Christians, these are Muslims, these are, he encompassed love and sweetness and caring, and he was just such a very, very special light. So he's our inspiration in this community.
Did he also write The World is a Very Narrow Bridge?
Yes. Gesher Tzami, the whole world is just a narrow bridge, just a narrow bridge, just a narrow bridge. All of this world is just a narrow bridge. Gesher tsar me'od, v'ha'ikar, and the essence, la'lefakah, is not to fear at all. The essence is to not fear at all. And this is from the teachings also of Rabbi Nachman, a very, very great Hasidic rabbi who was a tremendous light and mystic who brought many, many people back to God from all different traditions. You know, the holiest people, the ones who really see from one side of the world to the other, they're not stuck in any one religion. They're not Jewish or Christian or Muslim. They're universalists. They're people who see the beauty of God in every person. They don't break it down to this tradition, that tradition, this person is this one's better than that one. They just see the beauty and the light of God in the eyes of every single person. And our greatest teachers, like Reb Shlomo and like Rabbi Nachman, their love embraced everyone, and they didn't think in terms of who was who. You know, they just brought down light to bless everybody. So let's do the next little section here. Would you like to read? Is this working out okay so far? It's really interactive. It's nice to have everyone's voice and everyone having a chance. This little section I have for you starts here, as impossible it might seem, and then just to the end of this chapter. See what we come.
That's right here?
Yeah.
Nice big print.
Yeah.
As impossible as it may seem, one crucial goal is ultimately to become completely, totally bonded as a people. The model of this unity is in reality, all is one, the spiritual and the physical aspects of creation. The true task of a priest is to infuse the physical with spiritual energy, and as a nation of priests to be a dynamic and highly effective team working together serving the Holy One and taking really good care of His creation. We all need to be holy and exemplify high morality and true leadership. As I mentioned, the people of Israel can gain valuable hints and clues about how to be good planetary priests by learning all about everything that our own priests are commanded to do. Much of this is not well known or widely practiced today. To help educate Kohanim who wish to perfect their craft and also illustrate the parallels that apply to the entire nation of Israel as mentioned above, I have included detailed chapters on the first high priest Aaron, yeah, beautiful. And on Kohanic practices. We will then explore in the following chapters details of the blessings of the priests, the temple, and our special identity among the 70 nations as a nation of priests. The last chapter is to call to action, presenting the amazing work that many folks are already doing across the planet, and also illuminate how everyone can become personally involved in this crucial task of tikkun olam,
Fixing the world, repairing the world,
saving our planet,
perfecting,
and fulfilling our highest destiny as global citizens. My conclusion is my answer to my father's question.
Remember he said, what's it to you?
Based on what I know now, after spending half of my life since then being a Kohen and learning what I can about Kohanim. Even though my dad passed away many years ago, this book is my attempt to give him, myself, and others my very best response, just as if he was still sitting across the table staring at me.
Thank you, Annie. It's beautiful. Wow. It's so nice to hear this from other people, you know, and just get outside of myself. Instead of me being in the center of it, just step back, you know. I was 34 years old when that episode happened with my father. Now I'm 68. And so I've spent half of my life not knowing I was a Kohen, and half of my life since that revelation experience, my father telling me. So I guess it's a fitting time for me to address his question, you know. And so I was saying that the last chapter of my book it's sort of an answer to my dad staring at me like, what does it mean to you? Why? Why do you care? He didn't even realize that it meant that I was a Kohen, you know, and I wanted to give him a real answer based on the experience I've had since that event. And it's also an answer to myself and my own family and my people and really to everyone about what we're really doing here and what's the whole point of it anyway, and you know, what are really worthwhile goals to pursue in life, and what is the meaning of it all? That's what I'm trying to get to. And you know, like what we can do to do tikkun olam, to do. It's as if God made the world, but he left the last part of it unfinished for us to do the final fixings, the final little fine touches, you know, to complete the creation and make everything beautiful and make everything shine and make truth really clear and evident to all people and help bring people to a level of righteous living and high consciousness. And so we're doing this tikkun olam, these final fixings to make the completion of the creation. Questions? Okay, who's next? Next person? Great, come read this. Okay, let's see, how far is it? This, up to there, let's say, from here, start here and just up to there, yeah, with the floor, that's great. We're talking about, this is in the chapter about Aaron the priest, learning about his nature.
Aaron deeply realized the importance of good relationships between husband and wife and between a man and his friends and neighbors. Without a close friend, a man becomes a loner, an island. As it is the friendships in his life that greatly bring out human development and enjoyment. Man was not made to be a lone wolf. He was born to fit into a community and interact with them. This is for the benefit of both the man and the community. Hearing that an irate husband was baiting his distraught wife by insisting that she would receive no further benefits from him unless she spat in Aaron's eye, Aaron told the poor woman that he had an eye illness that required the application of saliva. Would she be kind enough to spit in his eye? She would thereby satisfy her husband's foolish demand, and Aaron would demonstrate that a human being's anguish was more important to Aaron than the preservation of his own personal dignity. Art Scroll, Berkes Kohanim.
Yeah, right, yeah. So this is saying that we have to make ourselves humble and low enough to put other people's needs above our need for dignity. I mean, we all want to feel special and wonderful and holy and perfect, but when it comes to being there for somebody else, you know, who really needs us, it's more important to honor them and be there for them than to think about, you know, how we look and how we feel, you know, and just to nullify ourselves almost in the service of God to help another person. And that's an important aspect of Aaron and all the priests and all of us folks, you know, to really be the messengers of God and the servants of God. That's what it's all about. Thank you. Really nice.
Right.
Let's keep going, yeah.
It pained Aaron to see broken relationships, and he on his own would do his best to repair any relationship that was on the verge of breaking down. When two people quarrel, Aaron went and sat down with each of them separately and said to him, "My son, know that your friend has said, I am ashamed before him because I have sinned against him. Woe is to me! How shall I raise my eyes and look at my friend?" Aaron would sit with each one until he had dispelled the ill feeling from his heart. When the two friends later met, they would patch up their dispute and rekindle their friendship.
Right. That's great. Thank you. He would go to people and say, you know, your friend really feels bad about what happened, and he really wants to make up with you. He just feels so embarrassed. He doesn't know how to approach you, you know. He's so broken the way he wronged you that he just doesn't know where to begin. And he would say that to each one of them. so that they would finally, when they would run into each other, they would just feel compassionately towards the other one, like, wow, this person really wants to make up with me, but doesn't know how to begin. And they would finally break the ice and work out their differences and rekindle their relationship. So, this chapter, and it's a pretty lengthy chapter, it's about 20 pages, talks about all the different stories about Aaron and his nature. And he was like the primary Kohen, the primary priest of the people of Israel. He was the first high priest, and he epitomizes this special nature we have of being priest to all the nations of the world. So I did a study of Aaron. I thought that was really important. Oh, here's another one. Who wants to be next? Here's one. You want to do the next one? Yeah, sure. Here, let me show you where it starts here and goes to there. Okay, so it's next to page.
You said,
if Aaron
would see someone acting improperly, he would not go over and rebuke or criticize the person directly. He would befriend him, pretending not to be aware of his faults. The person would eventually grow ashamed, thinking, what would my friend Aaron think if he knew I acted this way behind his back? How could I betray his trust and friendship? Sooner or later, the man would repent in his ways. This is a further reason why Aaron was selected by God to become the high priest, to represent the people he cared for so dearly, and to perform the temple service on their behalf. Aaron saw himself not as a superior of the people, but as a servant, one who serves and assists his fellow man both inside and outside of the temple. God also has relationships with people. He desires that each and every person have a close and personal relationship with him. However, it is highly unlikely that a man can exist without making spiritual mistakes. Such a mistake is a break in the relationship between man and God. If this break in the relationship was allowed to continue, the man would drift far away from God and eventually even forget that God exists. Some mechanism is necessary to bring man back to his original warm and close relationship. This is the holy work of the priest and his service during the days of the temple. In our day, this fixing and reconnection can be reached through prayer. This is the most important principle that the Zohar wanted to share with us, that peace, whether between men or between man and God, is of the greatest importance. Without peace between man and his neighbor, society could not exist. Without peace between nations, the entire world is threatened with destruction. May all of Israel be of the disciples of Aaron to love peace, pursue peace, and bring peace between men and between man and God.
Teaching of Larry Fine in a book called The Zohar and Aaron the Priest. Wow, it's beautiful.
Wow.
Peace is the key, to the existence of the world, and without it, we're not going to have the planet much longer. Push is really coming to shove. Now that our technology, our weapons have reached such a point of destruction, we really have to get our act together if we're going to hold on to the planet. I mean, it's in the old days, you could have wars among nations and people would be wiped out, but with the destructive power of atomic energy, it's really getting important that we can't, continue to make major mistakes that are not fixed anymore. And that's another reason why I felt really compelled to write this book. My small attempt in my small way, it's just like a little wake-up call to say, hey, just even among my own community, among my own people, to say we have to get our act together, and time is short, and we don't necessarily have forever any longer before, time can run out. So we really have to get our act together, and that really inspired me to write this. Here's another little part I have. So this chapter here is about Aaron. There's all kinds of really cool stories about him. One of the 613 commandments of the Torah is for the people of Israel to ensure, we're talking about perfume now, because Cynthia and I have this connection that we're both aromatherapists. So I thought that this little section that pertains to fragrance in this book might be of interest to you and maybe your group. So one of the 613 commandments of the Torah is for the people of Israel to be sure that God's perfume, which is the holy anointing oil that was produced by Moses. Have you ever heard of it? Did you know that Moses had to make this anointing oil, and then it was used to anoint Aaron and all the vessels of the temple and all the high priests after him, and also all the kings of the Davidic dynasty would be anointed by Moses' anointing oil. This was Moses' first task when he came down from Mount Sinai, was to make the temple incense and to make the anointing oil. And Moses had to make enough anointing oil to last for all time. No one else was ever allowed to use it. And that anointing oil has to anoint the Messiah, which means that it's still somewhere hidden away in the world. We have to be able to access and recover the anointing oil that was made by Moses. No one else is ever allowed to produce it. The holy anointing oil is used eternally, exactly in the way that it was prescribed to Moses on Mount Sinai. It contains pure myrrh, fragrant cinnamon bark, cannabis, according to Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. Some say it could be a different herb, and cassia, and a carrier oil of olive oil, or according to the real Indiana Jones, Vendel Jones, he used jojoba oil as the carrier. Let's explore the ways we can fulfill that commandment today and keep it alive, even though we don't have the oil accessible right away to us, although it's in the scene somewhere, we just haven't recovered it yet. Because this is the one and only oil that can be used to anoint the Messiah, this original oil that was made by Moses. Recently, the extinct Judaic balsam plant, and you guys are just coming up from the Dead Sea now. You went right by it. You have no idea what you passed by. First of all, the Judaic balsam is, the primary spice of the temple incense. And it was produced in the area between En-Gedi and Jericho, right along the Dead Sea, right where you're coming from. This extinct Judaic balsam plant has finally been restored to Israel after being extinct for 1,500 years. It was after the destruction of the Second Temple, the Romans took all the balsam plants away from Israel and brought them to Rome to try to cultivate them there. They weren't successful and the plants died, and those plants no longer exist, but there's still, it was recently revealed that true Judaic balsam, the botanical name Camphora opobalsamum, known worldwide as the balsam of Gilead, perfume. You must have heard it before. This is Judaic balsam. This famous perfume, it was worth its weight in gold, maybe more valuable than gold. It had extraordinary medicinal properties. It could heal almost any kind of ailment. It could probably cure cancer. Has been successfully transplanted in Israel after becoming extinct so long ago, and it's being cultivated in a special nursery right near En-Gedi on the Dead Sea, right where you were. You went right by the transplanted, you might have even seen it.
That's why we were.
It was just transplanted about 15 years ago. And the temple incense has to have Judaic balsam that grows in Israel. It can't use Judaic balsam that grew in Ethiopia or some other region. It's a sign that we're getting closer to the final days of redemption. I may have access to this material in the future through my friend, Professor Dr. Zohar Amar, a top expert on biblical plants and the temple incense. Dr. Amar did the transplanting from Ethiopia to Israel about 15 years ago, and he's overseeing this project. That's down by En-Gedi. This species of balsam is the chief spice of the temple incense, and only Judaic balsam that is grown and processed in Israel can be used for the incense. This is the only spice on earth that has its own unique fragrance blessing. We have different blessings for fragrances. This one herb, this one tree, this spice has a blessing all its own, and you can't say this blessing on any other thing in the world, and you can only say it on balsam that has grown in Israel. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam borei shemen arev. It's a special blessing on fragrance. Okay, let's do some more. Here, who's next? Let's do number 6. Oh, great. We're talking about the garments of the high priest. In this section, I'm talking about the priestly garments. It starts here. Let's see where just overview it. Oh, wow. Okay, great. It goes through there. The high priest would serve in 8 holy garments. Okay.
Let's see, hon, do you want to come help me read the Hebrew? You can help, sure you can help.
Okay.
The high priest would serve in 8 holy garments, while the other priests would serve in 4 garments. The 4 garments of the priests are
The ketonet,
linen
a tunic, some kind of a shirt. The
the
miknasayim,
linen pants,
the miznephet, which is something he wears on his forehead, and the avnet. Okay.
what would that be?
It's some sort of a crown piece. I'm not sure, maybe a turban or something.
The 4 additional garments of the high priest are
The hoshen, that's the breastplate.
the ephod,
The ephod, that's like a vest. You can see it here. Oh, you can see it on the cover of my book. This is the breastplate. That's going to be the cover. If anyone who comes up to my office afterwards, I'll show you the original painting. This is the breastplate of the high priest. The ephod is like an apron that was worn underneath the breastplate. Yeah. The me'il, which is something that goes across the forehead, which has the letters of the names of God. Oh, here, and the tzitz, a gold plate worn on the forehead with the names Yud He Vav He engraved on it. That's what it is. It's tzitz.
When the Urim and Thummim would be consulted, the high priest would
Have to wear
all 8 garments, and even then the Urim and Thummim could be consulted only by a king, the Sanhedrin, or public officials in the interests of the entire community, such as an army commander. The priestly garments glorify the temple and reflect the realization that every person is holy. Our thoughts, intentions, and actions are greatly influenced by the garments we are wearing. A nation of priests wearing royal yet modest garments is continually reminded of our beauty and uniqueness as individuals, while being a role model for the world of holiness and righteous living. Each priestly garment is associated with making atonement, repairing and strengthening an important aspect of our human personality. The 8 garments of the high priest have the power to atone for Israel's sins as follows.
Pretty far, huh? The ketonet atones for spilling blood. The miknasayim atones for promiscuity. These garments fix different places where people go off. The miznephet atones for haughtiness. The avnet atones for impure thoughts of the heart. The choshen, the breastplate, atones for wrong judgments. The ephod, this apron worn underneath it, atones for idolatry. The me'il atones for evil speech. And the tzitz, I think the thing worn across the forehead, atones for a brazen forehead, like getting a big head. Thank you. Wow. And I really think that this breastplate, I made it the front cover of the book. I had Yitzhak Ben Yehuda, this artist who did all the work, in my first book and all this painting here. We studied together for a long time about the breastplate, what it looked like, the colors, the stones, exactly which stone goes where, which name of which tribe goes on which stone. And then he did an original masterpiece of the breastplate of the high priest, which is in my office. If anyone goes up there, I can show it to you. It's like a meditation mandala. It's really powerful. But that,
discuss the Urim and Thummim?
you know what that is? These stones, this is really wild. The breastplate was a long thing that was folded in half. And folded in half, it became a square. So it was a double square and then folded in half. And in the bottom fold, there were two stones the priest would hold in his right and left hand inside the breastplate. And the stones had the names of God written on them. And when the priest would meditate, the stones would cause certain letters on the breastplate to light up, giving him a message about whether the nation should go to war or retreat, or, all different important messages that had to do with the survival of the nation. Somehow, these Urim and Thummim acted almost like an electrical battery that would cause the letters to flash and illuminate, or maybe magnetically cause the letters to illuminate. So the high priest was getting this is really far out, getting a message directly from God about what to do. And it could only be a question that involved the survival of the nation. It had to be something really important. But there's different records when it was used at certain times, really crucial times. They didn't know what to do, which way to go, whether to go to war or not, or how to respond. And the high priest used these stones and the breastplate to get a message from God to know how to direct the nation. It's really far out stuff. Okay, let's see what else I've got here. Okay, now I went into a chapter called Kohana Practices. Because when we study the practices of Kohanim, of priests, it teaches us how to act as a nation toward all the people in the world. So I have, for example, incense and oils. Again, I thought this might be relevant, especially because of Cynthia. During the days of the temple, a Kohen priest is specially chosen by lottery for a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to offer the temple incense on the golden incense altar inside the Kodesh of the temple. By burning the incense, the priest releases the most beautiful fragrance on earth into the air throughout Jerusalem. This is the unique fragrance of the Garden of Eden, which protects from death and bestows prophecy. It is written that at certain times during the days of the temple, there were more than 1 million people in the Jerusalem area, living in the Jerusalem area, who had reached this level of nevuah, prophecy, because they were smelling the incense in the air. And women didn't wear perfumes, people didn't wear fragrances, because the fragrance of the incense was in the air during the days of the temple for over 800 years, during the first and second temple. And this fragrance of the incense would give a person nevuah, prophecy. It was a very highly spiritually elevating fragrance. And it also protected against death. Now, the Hebrew word for spices is bisamim. Have you ever heard it before? Bisamim means spices. It's the same letters in the same order as the word bashamayim, which means in heaven. Bisamim and bashamayim. The same Hebrew letters with different voweling. Spices means in heaven. It's crazy. That's the 10 Commandments. Here we go. And this is what I was talking about at the beginning. As the 10 Commandments were proclaimed from heaven, a fragrance came into the world. It was really hard for me to find out the end what this was. I kept going around and asking. I finally learned. It was the aroma of the temple incense, spice mixture, which has power over death. That's the fragrance that came into the world as the 10 Commandments were coming down on Mount Sinai. The fragrance of the temple incense, which is the same fragrance as the Garden of Eden. And it has power over death. This reveals why all of the people returned to life twice as the first and second commandments were proclaimed. Each time people left their bodies, but then were revived and came back to life again because of the heavenly spice fragrance of the incense. that was in the air while the commandments were being proclaimed. This is what we learn in the Torah. When God, this is crazy, when God proclaimed the first commandment, of the 10 Commandments, all the people they died. They just didn't have the vessels. And they couldn't hear the commandment directly from God. They left their bodies. But because the fragrance of the incense was coming down also, they came back to life again. And then the same thing happened with the second commandment. God was giving the commandment directly to the people, and they didn't have the vessels for it, so they just left their bodies. But the fragrance of the incense brought them back to life again. Then the people said to Moses, "It's too much. We can't hear the commandments directly from God. God, you tell Moses, and he'll tell us." So from the 3rd through the 10th commandment, there they are on the top of the ark, the 10 commandments. From the 3rd one through the 10th one, God told Moses, and he told the people. Now this is really way out. In addition to receiving the entire Torah revelation on Mount Sinai, each angel gave Moses a special gift of knowledge that he didn't learn directly from God. Again, this is the messenger thing of, God told the angel, and the angel told Moses. It was too much for him to receive this knowledge directly. He learned the whole Torah, except for certain gifts of knowledge which he received from the angels. Each angel had one special gift to give. This secret about the incense, that it has power over death, was revealed to Moses as a personal gift from the angel of death. The angel of death was given the secret. It was in his keeping because he was the angel of death. So he was given the gift of knowledge that there's one thing in the world that has power over death, the temple incense. And it can restore a person back to life again. So Moses learned from the angel of death that the incense has power over death. This was a personal gift. And later, when you read in the Old Testament, when the plague of death broke out in the camp, if you might have read this before in the Torah, Moses asked Aaron to light up the incense pan and walk through the camp with it. And he went walking through the camp, and as he did, the plague of death stopped. But what you might not know, it doesn't say it right there, it says it in the commentaries in the Midrash. Not only did the plague of death stop, all the people who had died came back to life again. That's how powerful it is. It could even restore the people who had already left their bodies again back to life. A nation of priests, through the merit of their good deeds, is also emanating a fragrance into the whole world. This same holy scent of the temple incense, of the Garden of Eden. This aromatherapy will accelerate the paradigm shift and the rebuilding of the temple, waking up and elevating all of humankind to know truth, holiness, and righteous living. He's trying to get the idea what this book is about. This is a really hard book to write. I don't have a lot of people that I can study this stuff with, and you don't hear this stuff in yeshiva, and it's really hard to find a havrusa. I had to learn a lot of this late at night, studying with Eliyahu Hanavi, or a lot of this was revealed to me, and then I was able to track it through the different sources and different people. But it's really hard to find teachers for this kind of thing. It's not very well known. That's the reason why I wanted to write the book. Okay, now here's a really cute story. Has anyone ever heard of the farm, the Tennessee farm, and Stephen Gaskin? I don't know if you ever heard of him. This is one of the most successful communities in America. And I wanted to tell you this little story here. Oh, it's really cute. Would anyone, who's the next person to read? You would like to? Okay, great. This is a little story about a practice called lay back. This is really amazing stuff here. Yeah.
Can I just ask a question? What you just, before you go to the next section, what you just read, is that the principle behind the spice box at Hadal?
It brings us back to life again. Because after we go out of the Sabbath, we no longer have this elevated soul. We have two souls on the Sabbath. We have this earthly and this very heavenly soul. And the Havdalah, we're making a break from the Sabbath and going back into the week again. And we're giving up this elevated soul. So what the spice does is it helps to give us life to go through the week until we come back to the Sabbath again. It gives us something to go on without having that divinely elevated soul to be able to make it through the world, through the week, through all the challenges that we have to face, until we can go back into the Sabbath and have this elevated soul that can guide us and protect us. Again, this is helping to bring us to life and keep us alive in the meantime. All right, so this is a story from the Tennessee farm. Okay, try that.
When I was living on the farm in Tennessee in upstate New York back in the 70s, we had a strong community agreement to resolve conflicts and diffuse tension and bad vibes as soon as anyone became aware of them.
Right.
Here's a very special and very successful technique that we used almost every day.
Right.
During a meeting, at work or at home, in the car, or really any time, anywhere that anyone felt any tension in the air, they would call out, "Lay back." Then,
Can you imagine this? Wait 1 second. There was different kinds of conflicts and bad vibes come up all the time living in the community. And you had to be like a detector a little bit, but the people who were most sensitive would feel that something was wrong. You know, they would start to feel some bad vibes. So without thinking about it any further, they just felt some tension in the air. They would say, "Lay back." Okay, go ahead.
Then, according to our community agreement, everyone in the room had to be silent for at least 3 minutes and literally recline backwards from where the position they were sitting in. After 3 minutes, it was permitted for anyone to speak, but at any moment, if anyone picked up on any tension, they could again say, "Lay back," and everyone had to go back.
Can you imagine if they used this in the Knesset, or the Senate, or places? Okay, keep going. That's it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. It's a. In other words, there are certain techniques that might be available to us that could help us to bring peace and clarity and harmony in situations that come up all the time, where there's all kinds of conflict and tension. And it's very natural for people to butt heads. And it's meant to be, that we're going to run into conflict. But there are also techniques where we can begin to process. During this 3 minutes, what we're really doing here is we're meditating. It's not just shut up, it's meditate on what is happening. Become aware of what is happening in the room. Why is there tension? Where is it coming from? What's its source? And how can we see through whatever is causing this conflict and go beyond that so we can get to a higher place of reconciliation? Now, sometimes we would have to go through this layback process several times before we could finally elevate the group head, the group consciousness to a place where there was no more tension. Sometimes it could take an hour or more. Excuse me. But always, at the end of the process, there was no more tension. We found a way, to work through it. People had to say certain things in a certain way that didn't produce tension. They had to talk about what they felt and where they feel the tension was coming from. Some people had to remain silent and get in touch with their feelings. And sometimes it would get tense again, and then someone would say, "Lay back," and we'd go back into meditation for a few minutes. Sometimes the meditation silence would last for more than 3 minutes. It might last for 10 minutes or an hour before anyone would speak again. But when someone would start talking again, the words that they would say were almost always coming from a higher place of consciousness. And that's how we resolve these kinds of conflicts. It's really interesting. Okay, now we're coming to the Red Sea Torah. Boy, so many beautiful Torahs that I learned along my way. Who's the next reader? We're coming closer to the end now. This is number 10. I have another maybe 2 or 3 to go. Just enough to complete. This is called the Red Sea Torah. It starts here. This is one of the most beautiful Torahs I ever learned in my life, and it ends here. I'm just going to go into meditation while you read this.
My very first Torah lesson was at the home of the tall man the night that we met. It concerned the crossing of the Red Sea and how soulmates are brought together, or not, in this world. It left a very deep impression on me. When his study partner arrived, refreshments were shared, and I was amazed as they opened a giant book, the Gemara Sotah, and began mystically reading and translating the Aramaic, where 3 rabbis discussed this topic. The first rabbi says, each woman is drawn to a particular man according to his deeds, attracted by his thoughts, words, and actions. The second rabbi says, 40 days before every child is born, within our mother's womb, we are shown a beautiful picture of what our soulmate looks like in heaven, and at that same moment, his or her name is called out to us from heaven. The third rabbi says, when 2 true soulmates that were called out for each other from heaven actually meet up and get together in this world, this is a miracle as great as the parting of the Red Sea. All 3 rabbis are in full agreement with all of these teachings. This lesson never left me, although I did not understand it at all, until many years later when I asked Reb Shlomo about it. He taught us from Midrash Rabbah Bereshit that God created the Red Sea with the condition that when the people of Israel stood at its waters and cried out to him, the sea would part its waters only for us. Then the Red Sea was shown a picture of the glorious way that we as a people look in heaven. When we arrived at the sea in hot pursuit by Pharaoh and his armies, at first nothing happened. The Red Sea did not recognize us. Only when the armies surrounded us to destroy us, our backs against the sea, did we begin to cry out to God to save us. Moses raised his staff over the sea and told the sea to part its waters. Suddenly, the greatest miracle happened. The Red Sea recognized us as the people shown to it in heaven before creation. It parted its waters and we crossed over to another world. This is the same miracle as described by the third rabbi, when true soulmates become holy from good deeds, see with heavenly eyes, and recognize each other in this world.
That's incredible. The tall man is the one who first introduced me to Judaism. I want to tell you my story about Yerevan. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
I want to tell you my story. When I first arrived in Israel, I came here, I was hitchhiking across the Arab countries. I hitchhiked from Morocco to Israel overland. Not across North Africa. I hitchhiked across Europe, and then through Turkey, Syria, into Lebanon, back into Syria, into Jordan, and I got a pass that allowed me to cross the Allenby Bridge into Israel. This was in 1976. It was after the Six-Day War, so the West Bank was in Israel's control. I crossed the bridge at the Jordan River at the Allenby Bridge. This is my first time in Israel. What a beautiful way to come into the country. This is the same way that the people of Israel entered the land when they were coming from Egypt after 40 years of wandering in the desert. I crossed the Allenby Bridge and I caught a ride up through the mountains the same way that you came today, coming up from the Dead Sea. It was getting close to sundown and I was watching the sunset through the mountains, coming up those mountains from the Dead Sea to Jerusalem. This is my first time in Israel. And I started wandering around Israel. I went to the south at first, and I started becoming sick. I was outside of Beersheba. My urine turned red, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. Again, I was coming from Morocco, and I was picked up by a tender, a vehicle with a, large back area that could carry fruits and vegetables. This was a family of people, picked me up hitchhiking. This was the family of Iravot. This was the main leading people of Iravot. At that time, there were about 30 people living at Iravot. The main leader of the community was a man named Sandy, and he had 2 wives. And he was a former lawyer who lived in Miami, who had moved to Israel with his wives, and they lived in Iravot, and they had some children. There were some other couples and families living there, as I say, about 30 people. This was in 1976. And I told these people, they could see I was feeling kind of sick. I told them that my urine had turned red. They took me to the Kupat Cholim, the medical center, the next morning. And it might have even been that night. And they did a blood test, and they said, you have hepatitis. You must have gotten some bad drinking water. Maybe when you were in Morocco, or coming across Europe, you drank some infected water or some bad water, and you have hepatitis. My eyes were yellow. I had jaundice. And these people at Iravot took me in and nursed me back to health. They gave me a place to live. They gave me my own little caravan, and they fed me righteously and treated me like a king. They didn't make me work. Their main profession is they were growing fruits and vegetables and bringing them into the market to Beersheba. Once a week, they would drive into Beersheba in the very early morning hours before the fruit and vegetable market, the camel market in Beersheba, and they would bring their vegetables into Beersheba and sell them, and that's how they made a living. So I stayed with them for about 3 weeks until I was back to health. My urine turned clean again. I was feeling much better. My eyes were no longer yellow. And they said, okay, you're well enough to go now. You're good enough to travel. And so I traveled south, and I stayed in a kibbutz in the Arava called Grofit, a Hilleni kibbutz, non-religious kibbutz, for about 2.5 months. I only had 3 months on my pass, and I had to return back over the Jordan River and return to Jordan within 3 months, or else my pass would expire. In Jordan, they gave me a pass to cross the Jordan River for 3 months to visit the west bank of Jordan, which was actually Israel. So I was, realized that my pass was going to expire. I left the community, Grofit, where I was staying. I really didn't like Israel. I didn't like Israelis. I didn't like the materialism of non-religious Israelis. I was really turned off by it, and I wanted to leave Israel. I really had had enough. I could see it was a beautiful country, but I didn't like the people here. I didn't want to stay, and I didn't ever plan to come back again. This is in 1976. I decided to stop off at Iravot to say goodbye to my friends there who had saved my life. And I stopped in there for a few days, and I got to see them again. And there was this guy who was staying there, a cousin of a guy who was living in Jerusalem. And he was a really new age person, and we really connected. And we shared stories. We stayed together for about 3 days, just getting to know each other, sharing different stories, travel stories and stuff. And I was telling him about the Tennessee farm and my community experiences in America. And he said, yeah, I know you're leaving Israel. I know you hate Israelis. I know you don't want to stay here. But I want you to promise me something. This happened in Iravot. This saved my life again. He said, I want you to promise me that you will meet my cousin, Mikhail, who lives in Jerusalem and works at the pizza barn in Jerusalem, and just say hello to him and meet him before you leave Israel. That's all. I just want you to promise me you're going to do that. You got to really promise me. And I said, okay, I promise. I'll make my best effort. I only have a few days left and my pass is going to expire. I have to get back to Jordan. I wanted to hitchhike on to India, Nepal. So I walked into the pizza barn in Jerusalem. This is my second to last day before my pass would expire. And there's the story is in this book. The story of how this happened is in here. There's this very tall man flipping pizza dough 12 feet into the air. And he flips this dough up into the air, and he's looking at me while he's flipping dough into the air and says, "Welcome home, brother." And I couldn't believe it. I said, "Who is this guy?" And this is Mikhail. This is his cousin. This is the guy I had promised this guy that I would meet before I left Israel. I put down my backpack. I said, "Very nice to meet you." Yes, who are you? "I just met your cousin in Iravot, Moshe Rappaport, and he made me promise that I would meet you before I left Israel." He said, "Really, really nice. I'm glad you came in. Brother, sit down. Let me serve you some pizza." He serves me some pizza, and he says, "Look, why don't you come and stay with me tonight? I know you're going to stay in a hostel, an Arab hostel, in the old city before you leave Israel. Instead of staying at the Arab hostel, stay with me. I have a couch. You can stay in my living room. Come home. I'll make you dinner, and you can stay with me, and in the morning you can go." So I went home with him, and had a nice dinner. And this Red Sea Torah that you just read, about the teaching about the Red Sea, that's where I learned the Torah. That night, his Havrusa, his study partner, came. They took out this big Gemara, and they learned this Torah. And although I didn't understand very much about it, I was totally mesmerized by this Torah that they studied. And I said, "Wow, what is this book? What is this stuff?" I had no idea what they were doing. And said, "Well, this is our Jewish tradition. This is one of the Gemaras. This is the Talmud. These are the commentaries, oral and written commentary about the Torah. And, why don't you stay for Shabbat? And I know you have to leave on Sunday. Sunday's your last day. You have to go back to Jordan. Why don't you stay with me for Shabbat? I have all kinds of guests coming." I said, "What's Shabbat?" I didn't even know anything. I mean, I had a bar mitzvah, but I really didn't know, I didn't understand really what was going on. He said, "Mean you make a big celebration?" He says, "Yeah, we have 3 meals. I have all kinds of guests coming. We're going to learn more Torah. There's some people I want you to meet. Stay for Shabbat." I said, "Okay, sure, thanks." I stayed for Shabbat, and I met some of the most amazing people I ever met in my life. They came for the meals. We went to someone else's house. I was totally mesmerized. I said, "My God, who are these people?" He says, "This is the tall man, Mikhail, who was flipping the pizza." He says, "Brother, this is nothing. We have a community of 300 people who are the Hasidim, the students of Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach. And he'll be coming soon in a couple of weeks. Why don't you stay around? I'll tell you what, your pass is going to expire. You know what? I'm going to make my living room into your bedroom. You can live here in my living room. I'm going to set you up really comfortably. You can stay here as long as you want. And I'm going to introduce you to this whole community of people, about 300 people all over Israel. And when Reb Shlomo comes in a couple of weeks, we're going to go to his concerts and his teachings, and you're going to meet all kinds of the most amazing people you ever met in your life." So I ended up staying around. I let my pass go. He promised to buy me a ticket to Istanbul so I could hitchhike on to India. In a few months, whenever I wanted to leave, he'll buy me a ticket to Istanbul, and then I can go on with my travels. So I ended up staying with him in his living room, which became my bedroom, for about 3 months. And during that time, I met the most amazing people I ever met in my life. All the chevra, all the students of Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach. And those are the people who founded this Moshav. These are the people, the same people. So I ended up staying with them. And then one day, Mikhail, the tall man, told me it's time to go. What?
Blessed be his memory.
Blessed be his memory. He passed away some years ago. This is my holy wife, Leah Rivka. He said, "It's time to go from here, brother, and we're going to move you to another location." I said, "Okay." I packed up my backpack. I packed up all my things. I put it in his little 3-wheeled vehicle. He drove me across Jerusalem, up on the top of this mountain, and onto Mount Zion. Did you visit Mount Zion while you were here? Zion Gate. drove through Zion Gate, dropped me, okay, this is where we're stopping, take your backpack. And he brought me to this yeshiva, the diaspora yeshiva of Mount Zion, walked me into the office of the chief rabbi there. He said, I have a new student for you. I think you're going to want to stay here and study for a while. This is a yeshiva. Here you can learn all the things, all the details about the Torah. So I ended up living there for about a year. And that's when I really first became really established in Israel and decided I wanted to stay. And even though I did leave for Istanbul, flew out, and did make the hitchhike across to India, and all those travel stories that are in this book, I came back to Israel again and again and again. I kept coming back. And every time I would, reconnect with the people of Reb Shlomo Carlebach and spend special time with them. And eventually we founded this Moshav. And this became our new home. And that's how I got here, from meeting this tall man. There are different stories about my experiences in this book about him. That's how I became connected with this cover. Okay, who would like to read? Now, this is a chapter about the actual blessing. This is the blessing that I was telling you about, showing you that, the priests do during the prayers. And this is original origins. It starts there and goes to there. So it's this page and then a tiny bit more.
Okay.
The blessing.
Said the Holy One, blessed is he to Abraham from the time I created my world until now. I always long to bless my creatures. As it is written, God blessed them, Adam and Eve, Genesis 1:28, and God blessed Noah and his sons, Genesis 9:1. But from now on, the blessings are transferred to you. Whomever you wish to bless, bless. This is the true meaning of the verse, and you shall be a blessing, found in Genesis 12:2. After Avraham died, the Holy One, blessed be he, appeared to Isaac and blessed him, as it is written. And it was after the death of Abram that God blessed Isaac, his son, Genesis 25:11. Isaac in turn blessed Jacob, Genesis 27, and Jacob blessed his 12 sons. That's so rich.
See that?
After that, the Holy One, blessed as he said, from now on, my blessings are transferred to the Kohanim. They shall bless my children, for just as I said to Abraham, you shall be a blessing.
That's how we got it. These guys had it first, and then it was passed on to the priests, who were really the whole nation of Israel.
They shall bless my children, for just as I said to Abraham, you shall be a blessing. I now say to you, so shall you bless the children of Israel. The patriarchs of Israel were endowed with the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, also known as cosmic consciousness.
Cosmic consciousness. Higher consciousness.
Wow. Really?
Seeing from one end of the world to the other. Seeing future, past, seeing the present.
Which enabled them to perceive the spiritual essence of every person, right to the very core of their soul. Because they were not deceived by external appearance, they could bless each person according to their unique needs and potential. This very special ability was clearly indicated when Jacob blessed his children in Genesis 49.
When he had Ruach HaKodesh and could see the future of each one of them as the 12 tribes of Israel.
Because they were always capable of composing the most appropriate blessings, God did not teach them any particular formula.
God. And Michael, the tall man, was a master of blessing. He was the Gabbai. When we would read the Torah, he's the one who would call the people to the Torah one by one and then bless them. Because he had Ruach HaKodesh. He had this special ability to see through a person and to see their unique potential and give them the blessing that would really nourish their soul and help inspire them and elevate them to their highest potential. And this is a special ability to bless people. And everyone really has this innate ability. We just haven't developed it. But people like Michael, like Reb Shlomo, like certain people, taught us the secret that you can really see into a person's being, into their soul, and know how to bless them appropriately and deeply, connecting with the deepest part of them to wake them up and elevate their consciousness to their greatest potential. It's a very special thing. Has anyone else not read yet? Like I was telling you that one of the prohibitions about giving the blessing, you're not allowed to do it if you're holding on to anger. A Kohen priest is forbidden to bless the congregation if he's holding on to any anger at all towards anyone anywhere on the planet. He must completely fill his heart with love. Again, we're talking about the parallel of the people of Israel blessing all the nations of the world. The Levites must also emulate, the Levites must also emulate this love. These are the ones who are washing the hands of the priests and assisting in the temple, guiding the Levites in the special ways they assist the priests and inspiring them to be filled with love for the blessing. But then how can any Kohen ever do this blessing? As I was saying, there's always somebody somewhere. Oh, thank you, sweetheart.
Can I make some tea for everybody?
There's always someone somewhere who's really on your nerves, who's really bugging you out. Even if the person isn't right before you. Somewhere, there's someone that just whenever you think of that person, it just gets on your nerves. The only way is by putting any negative thoughts totally aside for at least a few minutes during the blessing, totally emanating unconditional love for all people everywhere and all of God's creation. And as we'll learn later on in this book, this prohibition against anger also has very important implications for a nation of priests and the relationship with all the people of the world. And I'll just sum it up. Basically, the Jewish people have undergone, and we're not the only ones, so much persecution, so much damage, psychic damage over the years, over the centuries, from so many different sources. You could say we might have a right to be angry against the nations or against certain nations or certain people because of the amount of persecution that we've been put through. And yet, this is the parallel, and this is what I'm trying to get across in the book. In order for us to arise to our task of being a nation of priests, we have to overcome that anger. We have to put all that anger aside. We cannot bless the 70 nations unless, at least part of the time, we can put aside all those feelings of anger and fear and shock from all that we've gone through and fill our hearts with unconditional love for all of God's creation, to be totally forgiving, and realize that a person in their right mind, when they're really emulating love, is not going to hurt another person, is not going to want to hurt anything in God's creation. And anyone that injured us, they just weren't well. They weren't seeing clearly. They weren't really receiving God's love and God's sustenance. They weren't really being nurtured in the right way. And they were coming from a place of anger and hatred or distortion. And we have to forgive them and put aside all of our anger to really become a nation of priests to bless. You see the parallel I'm talking about? A Kohen can wash to prepare for the blessing anytime after Kedusha, before the prayer leader reaches Ritzay and the repetition of the meter and all that. Okay. Now there's one more little section here I want to share with you, and then we can wrap this up, and any questions. This is my last chapter, really, I have one more chapter, this one, a call to action, that I'm trying to motivate people to really get out there and really do wonderful things to help care for the planet. This chapter is called Temple Days Are Coming. The temple days are coming, of the rebuilding of the temple. The temple is a blueprint of creation. Okay, just a little taste of this. The Holy Temple is the centerpiece of the blueprint of creation. It is described metaphorically in the vision of the patriarch Jacob, who saw a ladder joining the heavens to the earth. The temple is that ladder, serving as a gateway for us to the heavenly realm. As the house of God, it makes God's presence readily available to those from all faiths who truly seek Him. You see, this temple that we're trying to rebuild, the third temple, it's not for the Jewish people strictly. It's for all people. And they shall come to my holy mountain. We're talking about all people. And rejoice in my house of prayer. We're talking about the third temple. And they shall come to my holy mountain and rejoice in my house of prayer. Now get this. My house, this is from Isaiah, will be a house of prayer for all people. My house will be a house of prayer for all people. That's why it's so sweet that you guys asked me to teach you about this work I'm trying to do instead of something else. During temple days, there's a daily manifestation of the divine presence through miracles, the suspension of the laws of nature. And it can be seen by everyone. All the people coming up to the temple of all faiths can see these miracles right in front of their faces. Throughout the first temple period, a lamp of the menorah stayed lit continually, and the altar fire had the actual form of a crouching lion. Even in the days of the second temple, when the supernatural level was less evident, the second temple was not on as high a spiritual level as the first temple, Solomon's temple. Miracles were still constantly seen, even during the days of the second temple. The temple was a terrestrial dwelling place of the Holy One, with His presence more concentrated there, than anywhere else in the world. It was in essence the divine embassy of heaven and earth, where heaven and earth meet. That's why it's parallel to this vision of the ladder that Jacob saw in his dream. Without our holy temple today, life is fundamentally different. With the destruction of the temple, not only spiritual, but even physical nature completely changed everywhere. The sages of the Talmud, some of whom lived both during the time of the temple and after its destruction, they were here in the last days of the first temple. They were carried away by the Babylonian exile for 70 years. And some of these people returned to see the dedication of the second temple. They relate that the fruits now lack their full taste while the temple has been destroyed. The fruits don't have the full taste that they used to have during the days of the temple. The sky is not its true color. And the full beauty of music and song have been lost for now. Most tragically, the spiritual level of the Jewish people and mankind as a whole, the 70 nations, has been greatly diminished. When the nations of the world will finally realize how much good the temple brings into the world, they will surround the Temple Mount with armed fortresses to protect it. It says in the Midrash. Even today, the temple and its service form an essential focus of daily Jewish religious life. Prayers, holidays, and Torah learning are deeply imbued with the remembrance of the temple and longing for its restoration. Of the 5 books of the Torah, Leviticus and half of the book of Exodus deal primarily with the temple service. Our prophets have related God's promise that the temple will be restored, thus returning the service to its central position in Jewish life. This service that we have now in our synagogues, this is just a recreation of what was going on in the temple in a very, very minimal form. What we're trying to do here every day and on the Sabbath when we pray here, it's in our own little way, in exile, in the days of the temple's destruction, of trying to keep alive a memory of what was going on in the temple in our own little reduced way as much as we can today. Our prophets have related God's promise that the temple will be restored. Concern with the temple service is therefore not only a meaningful study of the past, it's a necessary preparation for the rebuilding of the future third temple, which will be the greatest of all. It will be even greater than the first temple, Solomon's temple. The temple site, even today, retains its tremendous sanctity. Whew. Okay, this is just a little taste of what I'm trying to do with this book, and thanks for inviting me to try. I mean, the book itself is my little feeble attempt, and this little presentation was a little feeble attempt within that to try to convey to you what I wish I could do, what I wish I could do with this book. It's like a wake-up call, to our people, to everyone, that this world was created for our pleasure and for our enjoyment, and we can do it all in a holy way. We can be holy people and have the time of our lives. We can be in ecstasy. We can be in love. And it can be done in the most holy way possible, with complete reverence, with complete respect to all of God's creation, with complete respect to one another. We're here to help each other, to support each other. We can't really do it without one another. We need each other. We're dependent on one another. And each one of us, each one of the Jewish nation and the 70 nations, each one of us has a special task, a special assignment, a special piece of the puzzle that's absolutely needed. We're all parts of God's creation, and we're interdependent. We really need each other to do our special function so we can fix the world, so we can do tikkun olam and rebuild the world again, so we can live in the way we did in the Garden of Eden and return and restore the beauty and sanctity to every part of the world. We are living in paradise. The whole planet is Gan Eden. The only thing that's missing is us. Everything is total paradise. If the people could just get their act together, we would be in Gan Eden. That's all that's missing. So, this is my little cry in the darkness, my little alarm clock, probably mostly to myself, to elevate my life and inspire my family and help out in my community, in my country, to try to make life real and meaningful and beautiful again and holy again, the way it was in the past. It won't be the first time. We're just making our way back again. It's like we were at one time in a very, very elevated place. Do you know what Reb Shlomo taught us? Why we were thrown out of the Garden of Eden? The Garden of Eden represents this place of perfection where we can live in total harmony with nature and with one another. Do you know why we were thrown out? It's not because the man or the woman ate an apple. It's not from eating the forbidden fruit. That might have been a sin, but we could have done repentance and stayed in the garden by simply saying, I made a mistake. I want to fix that. I want to learn from my mistake and then repair it and not make the same mistake again. If we had taken that attitude, we wouldn't have been cast out of the garden in the first place. Do you know why we were thrown out of the garden? According to Reb Shlomo, this is the craziest thing. because the man blamed his wife.
Yes.
The man blamed his wife, and the woman blamed the snake. And instead of taking responsibility for our mistakes, for our misdeeds, instead of saying, wow, I goofed, I really want to fix that, I'm sorry, we could have fixed it right then and there, and we still can. We still can today. That's the whole point. Instead of that, people blame each other.
Yes.
Husbands blame their wives. Wives blame people. And because of this blame, because of this reluctance to fully assume responsibility for the fact that we are human, we are limited, we don't see everything, we do make mistakes. That's okay. That's the way God made us. The biggest mistake of all we keep making is we keep trying to shift the blame to someone else because of our big ego. We don't want to admit that we were wrong, that we have limitations, that we could fix ourselves, that we could be better people. It's so much easier to just blame someone else. And because of that, passing about blaming someone else, because a man blaming his wife, God became so furious. God had made this beautiful woman as a partner for man, and what does he do? He blames her. He even took a dig at God. If you look in the Torah, when in the beginning of Genesis, when the man blamed his wife, he also blamed God. It's terrible. It's such a bad scene. God became infuriated, and that's how we got thrown out of the garden. And Reb Shlomo also said, the best way to be readmitted to the garden, to get back to paradise, people stop blaming each other. Take responsibility. It's okay to make mistakes. You don't have to keep making the same mistake over and over again. Take responsibility. Learn. A little bit like lay back. Learn from the mistakes you made. Stop. Meditate on it. Try to get to a higher place. Realize you can do better. You can take responsibility. You can become a better person. You can stop making the same mistakes over and over again. You can fix yourself. And when you do that, you become a role model. You set an example for other people. And when other people, everyone starts taking responsibility for the mistakes that they make and stop blaming other people and fix themselves, we can go back to the Garden of Eden, live again in total paradise. It's just waiting for us. I guess that's it.
That's your phone? Oh.
Any questions?
Well, after what you said, the questions don't matter. What you said matters.
Questions are great. A good question will lead to the next question.
Yes, yes.
This is what little I know. We share what we have. I mean, I've learned a little bit. We teach that which we seek to learn. This is what I'm trying to learn about. That's why I'm teaching it. I want to learn more. I want to understand more. My little part that I know, my little place, the function that I serve. I want to, reach my potential of what the person that God created me to be, and be the best me that I can be.
That's right. I want to be the best me I can be.
That it can be. And not keep making the same mistakes and stop blaming people and blaming situations, and really stand and take responsibility, and really take things, take life seriously. Then we can really laugh. The more seriously we take it, the more humor we can get to. The deeper cosmic laugh we can reach when we realize, wow, this is what it is all along. That's all it is. It's just for me to fix myself and become my true self and be the best one that I can be. And that's really all it is. And not shifting the blame to someone else, trying to blame my circumstances. It's all perfect. It's all perfect. There's just one little tikkun for us to make. We have these little chances every day to make things a little bit better. You see someone who's a little down, help to lift them up. You see something that fell down on the floor, pick it up. You see something that's a little broken, fix it. Do your part. Do it the best you can. Do what you can do. If we just all took that attitude, very soon the world would be such a beautiful place to live. People would stop hurting each other, killing each other, attacking each other. There's no need to do that. We don't need to hurt each other. It's just a reflection of the pain that we feel inside, that we're just projecting it onto somebody else by attacking them. Instead of hurting another person, meditate on it and try to fix that place. Elevate yourself above that place. We don't have to be stuck there. We don't have to be slaves to our past. We can go beyond that. We can go beyond ourselves. We can make ourselves better people. That's why we're here. That's the whole reason we're here.
And that's why we came.
That's
So we can learn.
the rest is commentary.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so Avraham.
Thank you so much
Thank you.
for giving me this chance to try to be myself.